Buongiorno a tutti, io sto aspettando che le ultime persone si possano accomodare. Volevo ringraziarvi di essere qua così numerosi e come al solito darvi il benvenuto a nome della Fondazione Cassa di Risparmio, che voi sapete anche quest'anno ha promosso questo ciclo di incontri sulla responsabilità. Voi sapete bene quanto noi si tenga alla responsabilità e che la responsabilità fa parte di quella parte della società che deve veramente crescersi e essere convinta di non solo aspettarsi dallo Stato o dalle istituzioni, che io credo che debba venire dal basso, le richieste debbano venire dal basso. E la responsabilità è proprio il tema per le quali queste richieste si fanno e quindi la società stessa deve provvedere a se stessa e ai più fragili. Quindi questo è il quadro nel quale secondo noi, intendendo fondazione ma non solo, molte persone che lavorano in campo del volontariato per portare avanti idee devono partecipare e dobbiamo condividere. Quindi noi come al solito buttiamo idee, non è che siamo da una parte o dall'altra, solo che semplicemente quando si ascoltano persone come il professor Shiva, la professoressa Shiva, io credo che usciremo da qua con delle riflessioni in più riguardo alla nostra vita, al nostro tipo di vita e al nostro futuro, perché in realtà è il futuro che anche se a alcuni di noi ci riguarda relativamente perché siamo vecchietti, ma insomma il nostro futuro sono i giovani e quindi vorremmo lasciare ai giovani qualcosa di buono e vivibile. Bene, credo che il professor Maracchi, che poteva benissimo presentarlo lui perché è stato presidente della Fondazione Ente Cassa di Risparmio, con cui abbiamo lavorato con estrema amicizia e continuiamo a farlo con estrema amicizia e stima, e amore anche per le cose di cui si occupa. Quando io ho chiesto Giampiero chi si può chiamare per parlare di responsabilità e ambiente, mi ha detto Vandana. Quindi sono molto onorata stamani di aver qui un personaggio che è conosciuto internazionalmente, che ha portato avanti battaglie importanti da un punto di vista dell'economia, dell'agricoltura, ma anche della società, quindi una lotta contro la fame, una lotta per la società in cui lei viveva e poi essendo una persona assolutamente internazionale per portare avanti le sue idee diciamo per il mondo. Quindi vi auguro un buon ascolto, vi auguro come al solito di uscire qui con più riflessioni, some more reflections. Vi ringrazio, vi saluto e lascio la parola al mio amico Giampiero che molto meglio di me saprà parlare e presentare la professoressa Shiva.
Thank you. Buongiorno a tutti. Presentare Vandana Shiva è molto semplice perché si presenta sostanzialmente da sé. Lo dimostra il fatto della quantità di persone che sono qui, che sono venute ad ascoltarla. Vandana ha una lunga storia, anche se è ancora giovane, ma insomma ha una lunga storia di militanza sulle idee che riguardano l'ambiente, sul rispetto del prossimo. E vorrei per presentarla fare un paragone che ci serve a inserire quello che lei dirà nel contesto della storia attuale. Siamo in un momento storico particolare, all'inizio di questo terzo millennio, siamo in una situazione abbastanza simile a quella che era alla fine del Settecento con l'illuminismo, prima della Rivoluzione francese. Allora si pose le basi per un modello di società che è quello che poi ci siamo portati dietro fino ai nostri giorni. Questo modello, e penso ne parlerà anche Vandana, comincia a essere un po' logoro. Vediamo che su certe cose magari ha funzionato, ma su tante altre non funziona più, anzi crea molti problemi e questo Vandana ce lo racconterà. Ecco, ora siamo in una situazione storica molto simile a quel periodo. Lo dico anche come presidente dell'Accademia dei Giorgofili. I Giorgofili nacquero, Vandana è stata ai Giorgofili nel passato, i Giorgofili nacquero nel 1753 perché un gruppo di intellettuali dell'epoca ritenne che il mondo stava cambiando e quindi ritenne che fosse necessario raccogliere un nucleo di persone colte, interessate diciamo al futuro per costruire la società del futuro. Io credo che oggi si sia nella stessa condizione e Vandana in sostanza è un intellettuale come quelli intellettuali che allora fondarono il nuovo mondo. Quindi secondo me Vandana va vista in questa proiezione, va vista nella proiezione di un nuovo mondo, che è un mondo che, se dovessi usare uno slogan, questo è uno slogan mio, direi meno Seychelles e più Garfagnana, nel senso che ma anche un secondo, meno Seychelles e più Garfagnana. Garfagnana is a small area of Tuscany, very beautiful, so I just saying minus Seychelles because people is going to the Seychelles for the holidays, but more Tuscany. E il secondo punto è che tutti ci aspettiamo che la democrazia venga dalla politica, ma forse la democrazia viene, e questi sono temi cari a Vandana, forse la democrazia viene anche da noi stessi, non quando si va a votare, anche perché in questo paese non si vota più, sicché ora si vota il 3 di marzo, ma è parecchio tempo che non si vota, ma la democrazia secondo me la si fa quando si va a fare la spesa. Quello è il momento in cui si fa democrazia, perché si sceglie e non siamo scelti, nel senso che fino ad ora la sensibilità, spesso purtroppo anche per ragioni economiche, è legata diciamo alla pubblicità. Ecco, invece se uno pensa al proprio cervello può fare le scelte per conto proprio ed è in quel momento che orienta l'andamento del mondo, perché lo dirà penso anche Vandana, se voi pensate che c'è una grande multinazionale della distribuzione americana, che non nomino, che ha lo stesso, ha come fatturato anno il PIL dell'Olanda. Quindi questo vi dà la dimensione di come il mondo oggi è fatto, cioè un'unica compagnia ha lo stesso PIL di un paese, non è un paese grande ma è un paese ricco. Ecco, quindi vuol dire poi sostanzialmente che a livello del planetario chi prende le decisioni non è la politica, che sarebbe stato il vecchio schema liberale, ma a questo punto è l'economia che decide per la politica sostanzialmente. Vandana su questi temi ha fatto tantissime battaglie in giro per il mondo, ha scritto, ha promosso, continua a promuovere, è conosciuta dappertutto, è arrivata ai primi tempi a Firenze grazie a Giannozzo Pucci, che saluto e che vedo lì davanti, che è un altro rappresentante di questo modo diverso di vedere il futuro per le nostre generazioni, per le generazioni che verranno, un futuro che speriamo possa essere per molti aspetti migliore del passato, anche se alcune cose del passato, per essere onesti, vanno anche salvate, perché non tutto diciamo è da buttare via. Io comincerei, per essere sintetici, con 5 questions to Vandana. The first question, I would give the questions in English. The first questions.
Yes, I'm getting
Yeah. Being a you physicist, why since the beginning you was interested in environment? This is the first question.
Should I take
Yeah.
that? I was fortunate enough to not grow up imagining that the environment was outside us and it was disposable. But it was 1972, 73, when I was going for my PhD to Canada to work on the foundations of quantum theory. I wanted to visit my favorite forests and streams quickly to carry the experience and image in my heart. And the forest was gone, and the river was a trickle. And that day I made a commitment, I'm going to do everything to serve the earth and protect nature, and then found out of this amazing movement in the Himalayan region where I come from, where women in the 70s came out and said, we will hug the trees. It was called Chipko, which means to hug. We will not let you cut the trees. You have to kill us before you kill them. It took 10 years of constant actions by the women, courageous actions. But finally, the government was forced to wake up that the forests were not timber mines that generated revenues and profits, but they were the source of water, they were the source of soil, and even pure air. There was a beautiful slogan that said, these forests don't give us timber and revenues, they give us soil, water, and pure air. The flooding made the government say, yeah, we can understand how there are flood control and conservation measures, but pure air is an exaggeration. And then comes climate change and the issue of forests as mitigation systems of absorbing the carbon dioxide. They realized the women were 30, 40 years ahead of them.
Second question. According to you, is agriculture a solution for the problem of environment?
Well, industrial agriculture is, in my view, the biggest problem for the planet. Because industrial agriculture is based on chemicals that came from war, whose only purpose was to kill. Whether it's the chemical fertilizers, and we are told without urea we can't grow food. Chemical fertilizers were made by the same process of burning fossil fuel at very high temperatures to fix atmospheric nitrogen. And this process was used for making explosives and ammunitions during the war in Hitler's Germany. After the war, they said, let's sell it as urea, let's sell it as fertilizer. The Xylon B, the gas that was used in the gas chambers, the poison gas that was used in war, they are all the basis of the pesticides that then were sold to us. And even things like Agent Orange, a herbicide. We didn't have herbicides in agriculture before. Agent Orange were a war chemical to attack Vietnam. So industrial farming is a war technology, both in the materiality of it, it's designed to kill, as well as in the mentality of it, because it is about war against the earth. It's a war against, every insect is an enemy to be killed. They forget their bees that pollinate. They forget their spiders and beetles. Every plant that you have not intended to harvest as a commodity is an enemy to be exterminated. So you spray glyphosate, you spray Roundup, which then creates superweeds and is a failed technology, but has spread poison. It uses 10 times more water to produce the same amount of food, so it has destroyed the water of the planet. It kills all the beneficial soil organisms. It is desertifying soils. Our manifesto, Terra Viva, was based on the links between soil and uprooting and refugees. Biodiversity, when you have an external input system, I think if there was one thing about the Enlightenment, it was about evolution from within. From within the person, that's freedom. From within society, that's culture. From within ecosystems, that is stable environments. But when you impose from outside, then you have to create uniformity. You have to create monocultures. And in agriculture, this has meant 93% of the species have gone. Meantime, it's a fossil fuel-based system, so it's emitting 40 to 50% of the greenhouse gases that are causing climate change. This was the manifesto we did before Cape Copenhagen together. ecological agriculture, local food systems are a solution to every bit of it. It's a solution to farming without toxics. And you produce more and better food. We can feed 2 times the world's population by getting rid of poisons, because they are killing that which gives us food, the biodiversity, the bees, the pollinators, the soil organisms. We rejuvenate water. On our farm in Dehradun, which is a research conservation training farm of Navdanya, our water level in 20 years has come up 70 feet. Everywhere else is going down. We rejuvenate the water. Because with 0.5% organic matter, you hold 80,000 liters of water per hectare. And of course, this is the only mechanism we have of taking all that excess carbon that's been put in the atmosphere by burning what the earth put underground as fossil carbon over 600 million years, and we're burning it annually, 20 million years of carbon worth. That is building up stocks. Those stocks can only be withdrawn by ecological farming. And our practical work, our empirical data, and the projections are showing if the world went ecological in its food system, we could within 10 years, if the whole world went ecological, we could within 10 years get rid of the excess greenhouse gases and make soil fertile and create better agriculture. 75% of the planet's destruction is because of industrial farming, but 75% of our health's destruction and the chronic diseases that are affecting humanity comes from the same. So we'd have a healthy planet, and we'd have healthy people, and it is an insane society and an undemocratic society that is not allowing us to make the transition, which is why we must become democratic and make the transition and take power in our hands.
Third question. During these days, at the summit of Davos on the Global Forum on Economy, the Indian Premier, but many others, including our President of Government, Gentiloni, they underlined the benefit of globalization. Is it correct?
You know, when you are as ancient as I've become, you've seen so many cycles. I've seen the birth of WTO, which is what was called the current globalization, but at a time when you were having the Renaissance and the rejuvenation, that's the time the East India Company was invading India, 1757. And it took over through what they called a free trade agreement. It's called the Farrukhshir Free Trade Agreement of the Right Honorable East India Company. A bunch of 300 looters and adventurers who became a company in 1600. They used free trade to take over. What is free trade written by corporations? Punish local production, get your taxes removed, get privileges of every kind for yourself. In the 80s, the corporations of the world again got together to write a free trade agreement. And while trade is not new, I mean, look at your country. It's been the center of trading forever. Look at my country. It's been exporting spices and textiles long before the East India Company was created, which is why the East India Company was created. They didn't create trade. They tried to take over and monopolize trade. The difference between the earlier trade and what happened with the WTO is that the areas they brought into so-called free trade, which I call unfree trade, is the aspects most vital to our lives. We are part of the earth. I see it as an earth family, and that's why for me, democracy is about earth democracy, the democracy of all life, the democracy for the earth, democracy for animals and the forests and the trees and the rivers and every human being. The first thing that was done, and this has shaped my life Dr. Maracchi, for the last 30 years, the corporations that had brought us chemicals now said, oh, they're tools of moving genes across species, and now we can pretend that we are inventing life. We can take patents on seed, and the royalties we will collect from farmers will be our biggest source of profits. I was at a meeting in '87 where they said, it is unfair that farmers save seeds, so it should be banned for farmers to save seeds by creating intellectual property on seed, which in effect means seed is an invention, which in effect means for Monsanto, GMO, the genetically modified organism, means God move over. We are the creators. We will collect rents from life. I started my work on seed saving at that time. I worked with my government, I worked with our parliament to ensure that the scientifically accurate and ethically correct position that we do not invent life is part of our laws. So in our patent law, we have an Article 3J which says, seeds, plants, animals are not human inventions. Therefore, they cannot be subject of patent. And therefore, companies cannot collect royalties on this. Now, in these 30 years, while the laws changed, Monsanto, which had put the intellectual property in the WTO, was hoping, in any case, to collect royalties. So they've collected illegal royalties in India from farmers. They increased the price of cotton, cotton seed, 80,000%. The GMOs aren't not working to control pests or weeds. They've created super pests and super weeds. So farmers are spending more on seeds, they're spending more on pesticides. 300,000 Indian farmers have committed suicide since Monsanto came in. Now, if our Prime Minister, in spite of this, goes to Davos and says globalization is good for us, it means he is saying Indian farmers don't matter. And that, I don't think, is responsible for any leader. Take food. The 3 treaties that were brought into agriculture and food that affect India very seriously and Italy very seriously. Because we are cultures of diversity. We are cultures of quality. We are cultures of beauty and taste. We have cultivated our societies around that. So intellectual property, patenting seed. The other is this agriculture trade agreement. What does it say? Punish the local farmer. Reward the dumper who collects $400 billion of subsidies annually, the global subsidy budget. Half of the CAP budget of Europe, half of the public budget of Europe is the CAP subsidy. Where does it go? For poisons, factory farms, all the wrong things. Who wrote the agriculture agreement? Cargill, the world's biggest grain trader. Do they grow food? Does Monsanto breed seed? No. Monsanto does nothing with seed, just has a patent and collects rents. Cargill doesn't grow any food anywhere, just trades in food and takes over entire economies and destroys food sovereignty and gives you inferior food in the process. Sanitary and phytosanitary measures. What's healthy? What's safe? These are standards written by the junk food industry to punish artisanal production. I remember there was cheese making in some cave that was considered not safe because hands were used. If a tomato is small or a cucumber has a little curve, according to European safety laws and the global safety laws, it's unsafe for your health. Diversity is dangerous. Poisons are safe. Food with no nutrition and lots of toxics is safe for you. But healthy, nutritious, diverse food made with love, made by hand is not. Now, all of this has cost India a lot. Not only have we lost 300,000 farmers to suicide, but every 4th Indian today is hungry, which was not the case before globalization, and every 2nd Indian child is wasted. So I would prefer my Prime Minister to remember the children who are hungry because of the rules of globalization. I would like him to remember that today, as he appoints Pepsi, the junk food drink maker, and Coke, He appoints them in charge of our food safety standards. At this point, Indian farmers growing potato are earning 10 rupees for a bag of 50 kilograms of potato. Pepsi sells 50 grams of potato chips for 20 rupees, a 20,000% difference. It's this polarization between what the industry sells you junk food for and what the farmer is receiving to grow real food. That is globalization. So it's a system of spreading of poisons, it's a system of using our tax money as subsidies, it's a system to destroy the real farming, the small farms, it's a system to destroy real food, to force feed us with junk food. Yeah. I have spent my 30 years fighting this system. I'm going to spend the next whatever years is given to me to deal with the truth of food and the truth of trade. And I just want to say one last thing on this question. I think what was happening in Davos was a theater. Yeah. Not in a theater like this, but it was a theater where people were positioned, leaders were positioned to say certain things. Trump was positioned to say, I'm anti-globalization. No, but Trump said he wants intellectual property. Trump said he wants the Trans-Pacific Partnership without the multilateralism. He wants free trade. He wants free trade, except he wants free trade of a unilateral kind, where he is the bully. Yeah, because multilateralism has some level of containment. Sadly, when my prime minister stands up and says globalization is good, he is speaking on behalf of the billionaires and the 1% who want to somehow keep globalization alive on its deathbed. Pascal Lamy, who was the Director General of the World Trade Organization, after we managed as movements, as real democracy, to stop the WTO in Seattle in 1999, Pascal Lamy said, WTO is in intensive care. Davos called us to talk about why globalization is wrong. Yeah. They now realize they got to give life to this beast. Yeah. Because if democracy wakes up, where will these corporations be selling their junk food and poisons? So the big giants and the 1% are scared of democracy. And they keep doing the Davos to make it look like some governments want globalization, some governments don't. The progressives want globalization. And the nasties don't. No, they all want profits for the billionaires. All want profits. Trump, Modi, Trudeau, take anyone. They're working for profits for the billionaire. That's why we need to practice the true democracy that shifts the system to the kind of principles on which we have based good societies. And the additional challenge today, of course, is that we have the planetary crisis. You know, when you had the Renaissance here, the planet was not in a crisis. There was a beautiful imagination unfolding. Today we have to be creative in the period of collapse. And that's a first-time challenge for humanity.
Fourth question. Since the beginning of your activities, do you think that something has changed in the sensitivity for environment in the public opinion?
I think as far as the public opinion is concerned, most people are now ecological. They care. They might care for their little city, they might care for clean air, they might care for a forest next door, they might care for their health and the diseases that are coming from the destruction of the environment. Globalization's three important ingredients were privatization of the public good. That's why I attempt to privatize water, privatize seed, privatize education, privatize healthcare. The second was deregulation, removing the aspects that protect workers, employment, so deregulation of workers' rights and deregulation of environmental laws. So globalization, in fact, is making governments take a position of being anti-environment. Because if you're pro-growth, and what is growth? Growth is merely a measure of how much you can extract from society. GDP was created during the war, just like the chemicals in farming are a product of war. This one number that dominates our entire economic thinking, called the GDP and the GNP, is merely an instrument created during the war to take more resources out of society, so that you can have more armies, you can have more fighter jets, you can have more ammunition. And the definition of GDP is, if you produce what you consume, you don't produce. Now, if you produce what you consume and it's counted as zero, then you get an economy where everything sold as a gift of Florence is coming from China. I've seen this change take place in the city. You know, every shop down the line, even our David, our little David, copy of the brilliant David of Michelangelo, made in China.
Yeah, all is made in China.
Even our goddesses are made in China. Baby Jesus is made in China. Yeah. And Mary and the goddess are the same plastic mold, except they change. Jesus and Krishna are the same plastic mold, except that Krishna gets a peacock feather and baby Jesus doesn't. Yeah. This crass mass culture of the dive to the cheapest is basically a dive to exploitation of nature and society. Yeah. And this extraction we measure as GDP. So of course India, you know, why was our prime minister made to feel a hero? Because they want to say, you're making the highest growth. Why is India making the highest growth? Because we were the biggest self-organized economy in the world. Biggest self-organized economy. 90% of what we produce is produced by local people for local markets. Our textiles, our food, everything. That is a big economy to grab. Yeah? If Amazon comes in and starts selling vegetables, which they're trying now, and Jeff Bezos, who's become the richest man in the world, said India made him rich last year. Yeah. By changing laws, it doesn't just happen. None of this happens. Cash is made illegal, tax systems are changed, so that Amazon trucks can go right through without paying any taxes anywhere. But our taxes increase. This is what the free trade of 1716 was all about. So we are in a period of anti-environmentalism by the corporations, who then paint themselves in green. So there's a lot of greenwashing going on. Everyone's green now. But you have a public that wants to live with nature, in nature, as Earth citizens. And that's the contest right now. That's the contest. I think the big change that's happened since I started was, you see, at that point, the power of destruction was small. The miners could do some harm. The loggers could do some harm. Maybe a dam builder. But today, the harm is so huge, and the footprint is so huge, that to destroy your olive oil and to destroy our mustard oil, all of the Amazon, all of Argentina, all of the Indonesian rainforest has to be chopped down for GM soya and palm oil. Now, that scale is because the scale of globalization is so huge. And does it support basic needs? Are more people getting food? No. 50% of the food is wasted. 1 billion people are not getting food. Half of humanity is sick because of bad food. So it's an inefficient system that needs a good assessment of what did you do 20 years, but more than an assessment, it needs an invitation for each of us to participate in shaping a system that works for the earth, shaping a system that works for humanity, shaping a system that works for future generations, because the future is being forgotten.
Last questions. Do you think that some positive outcome coming from the model we use up to now, we can save in a new model more environmental friendly?
Well, it depends on what is the sector. I don't think there's anything to be said.
For instance, in medicine.
In medicine, as long as other sources of healthcare are also recognized and remembered and respected. I was in a medical emergency in Italy a few years ago, and I was admitted to the hospital here. And I think there are these amazing traditions. For example, Leonardo da Vinci, recognizing the body as an integrated system, not as a mechanical combination of parts, as health, as a balance. Yeah? And the elements, a lot of my work now is seeing connections in things that were fragmented. The soil was fragmented from plants. Plants were definitely fragmented from our health. And now we are seeing how we treat the soil decides whether we have micronutrients.
We need an holistic approach.
We need a holistic approach. But I think the part of the holistic approach that's being helped is where the ability to do analytics feeds into the holistic approach and doesn't try and substitute it. So the difference between reductionist mechanism, which treats the world as fragmented, and an ecological paradigm which recognizes there's interconnections, but sees instruments that can inform us more. And two areas that I find extremely useful. The first is us understanding the soil food web. Now, we knew in India that soil is the basis of civilization. But today we know the microbes, we know the mycorrhizae, we know exactly what amazing work they're doing. And I think the second big support to a knowledge of Ayurveda, which is the science of health, the ancient Indian science of health, 5,000 years old. Today, what it said is being confirmed by the new work with the gut microbiome, that our gut is 90% of us is not human. 90% of us is little microbes in our gut. 100 trillion of them doing amazing work to create our health. In conversation with the food we eat, shaping our brain, our mind is being called the second gut. I think these are aspects that are extremely valuable. We wouldn't have climate science without the new things that happen. We had the morality. When I talked to Indian farmers, we had a disaster 3 years ago in my region where heavy flooding burst a glacial lake, and then more than 20,000 people were washed away. Every villager used the phrase, "We are violating the rights of the earth. We are committing sins against the earth." That's the thinking. But if you add that ethics with the science of climate change, that is the power of a new synthesis and a new holistic approach.
Thank you, Vandana. I finish my questions and I give you the floor for her lecture.
Thank you. Yes, as you said, we are in this moment of a new renaissance. Because you've had the last few decades and years based first on only rights and no responsibility, and on exclusively the rights of the powerful. So if you go back to what I mentioned about the East India Company, what was it called? It wasn't that we didn't have rich people before, and it wasn't that we didn't have merchants before. But they came together to create what they called the limited liability company. When profits are made, it will belong to the 300 rich men. But if the ship is taken away by the Dutch or the French or the Spanish because they were fighting all over the place, then the costs will be paid by society. Today, what we are arriving at is zero liability business behavior. No responsibility at all. And that's why the restructuring in our minds and the restructuring in our lives, our economies, needs to bring responsibility to the center. Now, we have a very beautiful word for this in our language, which again, the British messed up everything Indian. For example, the land beyond the Indus is called Hindustan. Hindustan, the land beyond the Indus. We've had Christianity when Christianity was born in India. We've had Islam forever. We've had Jainism and Buddhism and Sikhism and hundreds of religions. So the land of Hindustan is not about a religion. It's about a place. It's a geographical indicator. The British took the word Hindu, which was derived from Indus, and turned it from being about geography, a shared land, into a religion fighting the Muslims. And they created a divide and rule policy. But there's another very powerful word, which is the word for responsibility, the right action, which is called dharma, also made very popular by Buddhism. Buddhism is basically focused on dhamma. Dharma is derived from an etymological root, dre. Dre means to hold. To basically hold together ecosystems, hold together societies. Adharma is to break things up, break ecosystems, wipe out societies. And one of the words I am so critical of in the new globalization discourse is disruption. Amazon is a disruptive company. Of course it's a jolly well disruptive company, but it's an adharmic company because it's destroying the livelihoods of local businesses. And Mr. Jeff Bezos is committing a sin which Gandhi said is one of the highest sins, of wealth without work. You become wealthy, but you do no work. Others do the work. Dharma is responsibility. But it is responsibility in the context of knowing how you are related to the earth, to ecosystems in society, that we are connected. So I think the first responsibility to the environment is awareness of interconnectedness and transcending separation, atomism, and the idea that we are absolutely, we are atoms in society. With it goes the other problem of anthropocentrism, that we are somehow above nature. This was created for the Industrial Revolution. It was created for the fossil fuel revolution. We are part of the earth. We depend on the earth. We depend on the trees for oxygen. We depend on the soil for food. We depend on the rivers for our water. We depend on the climate to be able to live and do everything else we do. Our second duty is being aware of these interconnections, to live within the limits they set. So our production and consumption systems have to be within limits. What has globalization given us in 20 years? Destroyed the best textiles of the world and made them unviable. Brilliant textile designing in Italy. You could just walk into every village and any street and get the most beautiful fabric in India. Today, in the land of the sari, the clothing I wear, hardly any elite women are wearing saris anymore. They're all wearing the mass-produced junk based on exploitation, where women die in the factories of Bangladesh, where young girls are slaves in the factories of China. How can clothing become so cheap? Only because of exploitation, because it's cheaper than what goes into it, whether it's the work that went into it or the natural resources that went to it. So there's an absence of true cost accounting. And we've done this for agriculture for India. Every year, the destruction of the environment and destruction of society by globalized and industrial agriculture systems is costing India $1.3 trillion, which is more than our GDP. If you add to it the health problems related to bad food and junk food, it's another 1.5. So we are spending 3 times more from society to take care of the damages caused by this artificial cheap system. It's not really cheap, it's artificially cheap. Now, if the true cost was paid of everything that went into producing whatever's produced, and a very important issue that I've had debate with the WTO from the days of its birth is they tried to treat a GMO like a non-GMO. I said, but it's not the same as a non-GMO. It's different. It's got antibiotic resistance markers. It's got new genes that don't belong to the corn and the soya. You can't treat it as the same. And I have to say, one of the very big victories we had was when President Trump was used, no, not President, President Bush was used by Monsanto to sue Europe. Because in Europe, you had moratoria and bans on GMOs. In 2013, a case was brought against Europe to say you've got to remove the bans, you've got to have GMOs. And I read this item and immediately invited movements to join a campaign. Citizens want GMO-free food. We mobilized to collect 30 million signatures. And we took it to the World Trade Organization in Hong Kong and said, we are watching. If you give a vote against Europe's bans, you are voting for Monsanto. And we will call you the Monsanto organization. So they did not vote against the bans and moratoria. They held back because we participated in a democratic action. Otherwise, Monsanto had won, and you'd be eating GMOs like the Americans are eating GMOs. So knowing how things are produced and making choices about how things are produced is part of responsibility. That responsibility is affected because more and more people are being pushed out of the economy. Now, if you're that poor, you're going to go and buy a $5 jean. You're going to buy a bad McDonald's burger. Which is why this responsibility cannot be atomized. We can't say, I'll eat right, but society can go to hell. No. Because the model of thinking of those who become the billionaires and now control 87% of the wealth. This year, Oxfam at Davos released its new report on inequality. 1% control 87% of the wealth of the world. And they're now talking, the people like the fellow who owns Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, and all of them are now talking the language that 99% humanity will not be needed. We'll have artificial intelligence and we are going to have robots. They're already preparing for a redundancy of 99%. We cannot afford to go that way. We've got to create an economic democracy that works for all, not just for all human beings, but for all species, because the economy comes from oikos. Oikos means our home. It's the root of ecology. So caring for our ecological home through our economic activity is the social and political part of responsibility. And this brings us to another dimension of responsibility that has guided my work for the last 45 years, not just when I started saving seeds, but also when I was dealing with the issue of rivers being dammed or water being privatized. That the basic things of life, and this is Roman justice, this is the law, that everything vital to life must stay in the commons. Everything vital to life. whether it be the water and the rivers, or now it be the healthcare and the education systems, or the town planning and the agriculture planning. These are commons. The commons require common responsibility. And common responsibility means we have to do what we've had to do forever, which is resist the enclosures of the commons. The British commoners had to do it when their commons were being enclosed at the time of the Industrial Revolution. The beginning of Chipko was resisting the destruction of their common forests. I was in Italy often to support the referendum on the fight against the privatization of water to reclaim it as a public good. In India, we've been successful in doing two things that people thought were not doable. We stopped the World Bank from trying to privatize our sacred Ganges River and allow the world's biggest corporation in water privatization, Suez, to sell that privatized water to Delhi and the rich colonies, not the whole of Delhi. So we started a movement for water democracy, and I remember the World Bank invited me for a discussion when this movement was at peak. And I went with lots of women, and they didn't let the women into the office, but the women were there with empty pots in their head. And I gave to Zolik, who was then the World Bank president, a little copper pot in which we put Ganges water. And I said to him, we are not going to let you privatize our Ganga, but I want you to keep this near your bed. So every night when you sleep and every morning when you get up, you will remember that for most of the people in the world, water is not a commodity for sale. Our Mother Ganga is not for sale. And we stopped that privatization. And then Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, they put manufactured by on their bottles. Manufactured by. Do they manufacture water? No, they don't. They steal water. 1.5, 2 million liters per day from a place. And women of a village in Kerala, in 2002, I think they called me, they were fighting against Coca-Cola to say, you cannot steal our water. We will stop you from this theft. It took years, but today, the Coca-Cola plant is shut down, and water is now recognized in that community and in Kerala as a common good, as belonging to the community. Even in the area of climate, I think the atmosphere is a commons. And when they started, instead of stopping pollution, which is the normal responsibility, they started to reward the polluters through emissions trading. It was said that the right of the polluters, really, to trade in emissions, which is pollution, is like the right of copyrights, patents, and licensing rights. That in effect, by polluting, the polluters get rights to the atmosphere. So they privatize in the first instance by putting pollution in a commons, and in the second instance by making money out of trading in this pollution. This, in my view, is an enclosure that has to be dealt with. But how do we deal with this enclosure? First, we have a duty to share. I think this consciousness of us being Earth citizens is a consciousness that helps us realize that we are one species among many. We are one individual among trillions of microbes, millions of species humanity has recognized, and 7 billion other human beings. That this beautiful, generous Earth, which can provide everything that we need for everyone, that Earth belongs to all. That's a responsibility, the duty to share. And we don't have a right to take someone else's share. We have a very ancient Upanishad called the Isho Upanishad, which says, the earth and the universe is for the good of all. Take your share and enjoy it. But abhor greed, because taking someone else's share is being a thief. So we have an economy of privatization based not just on greed, but on theft. And that's why we need a true cost. We need a real economic calculus, and that's where science and economy, which have gone different paths, have to become one. And ecology and economy have to become one. We have a duty to care. You know, how do babies get taken care of? We have a duty to care. You know, people say, oh, isn't it tough to do the work you do? I said, no. Because when you know it's your duty, it just flows. Is it tough to feed your baby? Is it tough to change the nappy when it's wet? It's part of your duty, and duties are effortless because rights flow beautifully out of them. They're like a spring. Duties are like a spring from where water flows. And our actions are the water that flows from duties. So over these years, we've been doing work, not just on protecting biodiversity, growing more food. We can grow, as I said, food to feed 2 times the world population. But our work on biodiversity and organic farming is showing that we could actually reverse climate change, both through mitigation, through adaptation, and through resilience. All of it comes together. Most importantly, in today's time, we have a duty to hope. Because more and more, some scientists have started to say we as human beings have just 1 century on this planet before we go extinct. And then people like Stephen Hawking, who I respect otherwise, but I don't agree with him when he says we have a century for going extinct to extinction, but we have an option of escaping to Mars. First of all, he doesn't realize Mars is not the Earth. The Earth creates life, Mars does not. You can spend trillions trying to figure out how you'll grow food on Mars. You can spend a little bit of care to grow more food by caring for the Earth here. There's a person who makes electric cars, Elon Musk. His big project is something called SpaceX. How to migrate out of the Earth, which is going to sink. And I keep saying, if you're that much of an ecologist, Mr. Musk, why would you condemn the Earth to sink? Wouldn't you start taking care of it today? Because everything that's destroying the Earth has been caused by irresponsibility and greed, and everything that's causing harm can be stopped by replacing greed with compassion and irresponsibility with responsibility. It's totally doable. Stay home. He's selling tickets to Mars on spacecraft for $1 billion and saying, and of course there aren't enough human beings who will be able to afford it. So most of them will not be able to go to Mars, and they will go extinct. But the part that I found very telling, because he's an American, and on the food issue I feel sad for Americans. Poor Elon Musk says, and I have figured out a way to ship building material and ingredients to create a Pizza Hut on Mars. And I'd say our responsibility is, you know, eat your wonderful pasta and your olive oil here, and we'll eat our chapatis and our dals in India, and the Earth is giving us a last chance as a species and saying, stay home, I've taken care of you, I will still take care of you if you take care of me. Just give me a little bit. And that little bit is our responsibility. And that's why this moment in our evolution is exciting, because each of us becomes relevant to the future of our species. Thank you.